Hey everyone. This is something I'll start trying because, as I said in the second video I did, they're hiding God Yahweh, and it's not with a globe. I said that when I was done making those two videos, and I'm not sure if I'm going to have a follow up like a part 3 or not, because there's so much general material that I could cover. I think I've shown very conclusively how we've got a serious problem with language and understanding the language and knowing the actual meaning of the language, because if language is not inherent, if you cannot extract the meaning of the characters as they form roots, parent roots, child roots, and then they're put together to form larger words. Those words are put together to form thoughts or ideas, and those ideas are then expressed in a larger context. If there is no inherent meaning to those things, then the only meaning there is to those things is some lexicon, some dictionary, some concordance, encyclopedia. It's outside sources. It's things that other people have done. It's other people's definitions. And it's really easy to show the influence of the Masoretes on the text, the changes that they made. Rush hour. But since a lot of the work that I'm doing right now has really got me deep involved in something that I wasn't sure that I was going to get involved with, I got pulled into this one. And you'll hear about it because I'll be coming out with at least a video on it, if not more, but it's time consuming, as well as trying to set up the archaeological verifications of all of the ancient Hebrew or Proto-Sinaitic or Phoenician, what have you, variants of the old Hebrew language. Trying to verify those archaeological finds is daunting in and of itself. So, since a lot of my ideas, they don't like to just wait around in my head until the morning when I've got some quiet time, I'm going to try to get them out as I can during the day onto my phone, and then load them onto my computer and put them out. I don't think there's any reason necessarily that you got to be staring at my mug, but I tried downloading an audio recording only app through Apple for the iPhone, and the only thing, it'll only record like a minute at a time. The free version, if you want it to record more, you got to pay for it, which is fine. I just haven't I haven't looked into all of the available audio programs that I could get, so that I would know, okay, well, that's probably the best one, and I should, invest in that. So you're getting video for right now with the audio. So there was just a few things that I wanted to talk about. One of them is for any of you who have, if you're aware of the questionable nature of the book of Esther, and if you're not, there's no shortage of people that have done written work or audio presentations on the problems with Esther, do a search on it and see what you find, and they're going to make some really great points. I mentioned this recently because, I had heard the case against the Book of Esther from Bertrand Comparet quite some time ago. But even before I heard that, it did strike me as rather odd that you never see the name of Yahweh. You never even see his title, Elohim, Eloah. It's not there. There's not even Yah there. It's absent from that book. There's no incidents of prayer to him for help, prayer to him for thanksgiving. Nothing. He, a lot of people that believe that it belongs in the canon will say, well, technically he's absent from the book, but his presence is all over the book. And I think that's a cop-out in a lot of ways. You could say that about pretty much anything. And if we're using Scripture to compare Scripture, then we've got to admit that it sticks out like a sore thumb. Specifically because, I've said this many times, 6,830 times in the so-called Old Testament, the name of Yahweh is used. That's not counting Elohim, El when he's called, in some instances, Adonai, my Lord, El Shaddai, variants on his title, El. So it's vacuous in that sense. And then ultimately, what's the moral of the story of Esther? Pillage, death, and plunder of the enemies of the Jews. And in Esther, they use the word Jews. Now that right there is its whole other issue, actually. I am extremely uncomfortable even with the term Jews. I know a lot of people who identify them as being behind many of the evils of this world. They use the term Jew and Jews. I've got a serious problem with that. Specifically, it comes from Yahshua's words in Revelation 2 times in chapters 2 and 3. He says, those who call themselves Jews, Judeos, but lie, are the synagogue of Satan. And I've done enough of a word study on Judeos and its use in the New Testament alone, not to mention Eudei in the so-called Old Testament, to tell you that using the term for these people that are pulling the strings, who call themselves Jews, by calling them Jews, we're affirming their lie. Jesus said they're not Jews. So I've been trying to come up with something for at least a few weeks now that I finally put a lot of this together. What exactly should I call them? And the best thing I've come up with now is pseudo-judo. And, it's a work in progress. But for anybody who is able to look at some problems without being so dazzled by that authoritarian word that tells you these are the books of the canon, no more, no less. These books of the canon were delivered to us by the very hand of God. They are all absolutely 100% inspired, and if you say anything otherwise, you're a heretic, and you will go to hell twice. Now, if that sort of mindset and mentality does not frighten you, and if you have listened to some of my previous arguments against the New Testament being written in Greek and the reasons for it, and I would also argue that the Septuagint, although the Septuagint may have a form to it that is far closer to the form of the original Hebrew books, I still would not call the Septuagint inspired either, and because it has its own big set of problems. You know, for one thing, the tradition, to Septuagint, how it got its name, which is kind of a misleading name, is that there were 6 elders from each of the 12 tribes of Israel that went to Egypt and did this translation in 70 days and 70. Well, look, if the first part of that is true, then we should have an immediate problem with it, because the only people that were supposed to be acting as scribes were Levites. So if you've got elders from every other tribe acting as scribes, that should be the first red flag. Going down to Egypt and doing this in Egypt should be another red flag. And there's a myriad of issues that I don't even want to go into right now, because I don't have my notes in front of me concerning the wording used in the Septuagint. So again, I would like to submit that I think it is very possible that the Septuagint in form can tell us a lot concerning the adjustments of the Masoretes, but as far as, you know, inspiration, I've got a big problem with that. But anyways, so this is going to kind of continue what I've been saying about the language. Not only the fact that I've got a real problem with the New Testament being written in Greek originally, but also with a few of those books from the so-called Old Testament that were supposed to be written in Aramaic. Again, Aramaic is not Hebrew. The Jewish character today, which they call Hebrew, that is, of course, strikingly Aramaic. It's also sometimes called Chaldean, because it was said to have been brought back from Babylon. Now, there's definitely something we want to include in our canon and understanding of Scripture, right? Babylonian anything. Now, it is said that Ezra the scribe, Nehemiah the governor, and a portion of Daniel from 2:4 to 7:28 were all written originally in Aramaic. Now, I don't have the goods yet on Esther and that portion of Daniel. But I have this question I'm going to pose, at least in this quick segment here that I'm doing. In Nehemiah, go to Nehemiah, the last chapter of Nehemiah, and it probably doesn't matter what translation you read it in. Probably does a little bit, but for the most part. Read the last chapter of Nehemiah. In the last chapter, Nehemiah says that he was called back to Susa temporarily. Now, I don't know exactly how long it was. I don't recall him saying. I could be wrong. Read it for yourself and let me know. Which I'm sure I'll end up reading it again, but I don't know how soon. Anyways, he gets called back there. When he comes back to Jerusalem, things are in a real state of disarray. So you got to think maybe he was gone for a little while. And his biggest issues when he gets back are specifically the Levites intermarrying with other peoples around them that they were strictly told to not marry with. And you have to figure too, you have the Israelites, which are described by Yahweh as his possession, a special people consecrated to him. Okay? And then when the northern tribes were put out of Yahweh's sight, and you had the two southern tribes with the intermixture of Levi too, because they were the keepers of the things of the temple and scribal duties. And so even among all Israelites, you had even a step further as far as separation and consecration of the Levites. You'll find in Ezra that you could not do Levitical service or duties if you weren't a Levite that could trace your generations back. Yahweh has laws he gave to Israel concerning intermarriage. Even in, you'll find it in Deuteronomy 23. Even though he does allow intermarriage at that time, and I'm not saying something changed, I'm saying I'm not aware of where the verse would be that if it had. At the time, Deuteronomy 23, he says, do not abhor or despise the Edomite or the Egyptian. He says the Edomite is your brother, and the Egyptians, you were strangers in their land. Now, he does say, you will never marry Moabites and Ammonites, because they withstood you and did not help you when you came near to the promised land. And he goes in other sections of the Torah and past that, he goes into other expressions of displeasure concerning them marrying people of other tribes, other peoples, other races, what have you. And that's not always the case, but you got to think about it for a while, and I think you're going to start coming to some pretty poignant conclusions when you understand that, for instance, even though he doesn't want the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 23 to marry an Edomite or an Egyptian, he allows it with the caveat that the children of that marriage are not allowed to represent their respective tribe in Israel the congregation of Israel for 3 generations. And these are 2 people who he told not to hate, not to abhor. All right? So when they come back, and Nehemiah is gone for a while, and he comes back, he sees that Levites and others, and I know it's really dark in my truck right now. The video is going almost black, but that's okay. This is more listening than watching. So the Levites and other Judahites are marrying people of other tribes around them. People they're not supposed to be marrying. And he does not take this lightly at all. He gets very violent with some, in fact, because of this. He really cleans house when he gets back to Jerusalem. The thing is, specifically, he was talking about, and Nehemiah is one of a couple of spots in the Bible where you'll see the word mamzer. That's the word they use. There's a root there, zerah, meaning seed, with a double M at the front. Zer. That double M, I pose to you with knowing what bit I know about the source language thus far, is an emphatic expression of confusion, a mamzer. So he's expressing his displeasure in the mixing of Judahites, Levites, and Benjamites, I'm sure, with these people of the tribes around them. And he's so upset, he says that their children, the children of these unions, so he must have been gone a good few years. The children of these unions, he says, can't even speak our language. Their language. And he's speaking of the Judahites. Now, he uses a word, Yehudi. But I'm going to ask you this. What language is he referring to? Is he referring to Chaldean, Aramaic, as he glows in his anger and jealousy for purity? Is he going to call their language, even though it calls it Yehudi, their language, do you really think he's referring to Aramaic or Chaldee? And if you affirm that he is in fact referring to Hebrew, why would any sensible person think that he would be that jealous for the things of Yahweh, the God of Israel, and the purity of Israel, and that he would be writing all these things down in Aramaic, Chaldean? That's just some food for thought concerning the language of our scriptures. And I am fully confident at this time that time itself is going to bear out what is true, what is not, and that our God, the God of Israel, will be glorified, as well as his son, Yahshua, be honored. And right now, I'm not seeing how that is fully being realized with his word not only being represented in 3 different languages, and you could almost say more than that because of the variants of Greek in the New Testament, And then there's all those who would argue for the New Testament being in Aramaic and so on and so on and so on. If it is so that I can fully prove the value, the value as far as invaluable nature of Hebrew as a language, which our God chose to express himself and his instructions through his prophets. He chose that language. And if I am able to show that it has intrinsic meaning and intrinsic value, then I have to say I'm not sure how anyone would then believe beyond that all these other portions of it would have been written in any other language. To me, that's confusion. So until I make this next little bit, or maybe I'll publish this, I don't know, it's 26 minutes. I hope to see you guys again soon with more on this topic that I've been working on, because I don't see me stopping or slowing down on this anytime soon. So until next time, I hope you guys take care. Bye.